This is the generation of them that seek his face. This is the generation of them that seek his face.
Shabbat Shalom. We want to welcome each and every one of you here to our Olive Tree Discipleship Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Those of you that are here and those of you that are coming in through our YouTube station, Torah Unleashed, I want to just welcome you and thank you for joining us here on our study today. There we go. We are teaching today part 3 of the fundamentals of planting a mosaic, messianic, and apostolic home groups, fellowships, or congregations. Now, one of the responsibilities of every congregation, one of the responsibilities of the ministers of Adonai is to replicate ourselves, to replicate. Discipleship is something that you are discipled, and then you are sent, and you disciple others, and they are discipled, and then they are sent, and that's what it's all about. That's what the Great Commission was originally when Yeshua took 11 men that he had discipled. Remember, Yeshua spent 3.5 years with 12 men. He also spent 3.5 years with 70 others, but those others came and went. But there was specific 12, and of course by this time, Judas had hung himself and had left the ministry in a sense. And so there was 11 men. He took them to the top of Mount Arbel there on the Sea of Galilee. And on the top, he commissioned them. He ordained them. And as he sent them out, he says, go make disciples of all nations. Now look what he says, and look what he doesn't say. He doesn't say make disciples of Jews only or make disciples of Israel only. No, he said make disciples of all nations. Now the word nation there, ethnos, where we get the term ethnic, in Hebrew it's goyim, plural, goy singular, and goyim plural. So make disciples of all Gentiles, all nations. Yes, Israel is first. That's why Paul says to the Jew first and the Greek as well. But our responsibility is to go and make disciples. My responsibility, my primary responsibility is to disciple you, to train you, to teach you. And you as a disciple are a learner. A disciple, a learner, a talmidim is a sponge. A talmidim is a sponge. And a sponge is that which soaks water. And you soak the water of the word. And I've soaked water. And the water that I've soaked, now I give to you so that you could soak it up, so that in turn you could give to others. And again, the gospel of the kingdom is transformed and sent out. And as we read the Torah scrolls, and I love when all the young people at 29 and under are here, and from the oldest to the youngest, and we are actually transferring the gospel. We're transferring the gospel of the kingdom to the next generation. And that's what we're called to do. That's our primary, that's why you're here. That's why you're here. And when we transfer this, and then we go out and we live the life, every one of us, from top to bottom, we live the biblical lifestyle. But we need to learn that lifestyle. And how do we learn it? We learn it in the context of congregations, in the context of fellowships, in the context of the ecclesia. You know, one of the funniest things I've heard people say is, well, I could go have church in the mountains. No, you can't. Did you know it's impossible to go have church in the mountains? Now, you could go to the top of the mountains and praise and worship Adonai by yourself. Yes, you could do that. But you can't have church. You can't have kehillah. You can't have an assembly. Assembly means a group. That's why James says when someone comes into your synagogue, the word synagogue means the gathering place. This is our synagogue. This is our synagogue. This is our gathering place. And in the synagogue, there is the ecclesia, the assembly. We together here are the assembly of Yeshua, the assembly of Elohim. Kehillah, Yeshua, Kehillah, Messiah, Kehillah, Elohim are terms that are used both in the Tanakh and in the apostolic writings. So we're a body. The book of Hebrews says, forsake not the assembling of yourselves as the manner of some is, but even so more as you see the day approaching. How many of you see the day approaching more and more? The more the day approaches, the more we should fellowship, the more we should get together. And by the way, the word there, forsake not the assembling of yourself, that's the word again, synagogue. Forsake not the gathering of yourself in places. And this has been the way of Adonai from the beginning. That's why Adonai called Moshe, think of it, Adonai called Moshe, and he gathered the fellowship, the kehillah. He called it the kehillah. I don't know why the King James Version uses the word church in what they call the New Testament, but they use the word congregation or the assembly in what they call the Old Testament. No, both the Tanakh and the apostolic writings use the same Greek and Hebrew word, kahal and ecclesia. Kahal and ecclesia in the Tanakh, kahal and ecclesia in the apostolic writings. But modern Christianity has divided them, saying, well, that's the assembly of Israel and this is the church of Jesus Christ. No, that's not the way it is. There's only one assembly, and that one assembly is the olive tree of Israel. The olive tree of Israel of Jeremiah 11:16 and Romans 11:16. Both of these talk about the olive tree of Israel. And that's the body of Messiah. That's the body of Israel, the body of Messiah. And Adonai wants us to get together. He wants us to be together. It'd be nice if the whole city could get together. But as long as we get together, never be an individual, independent believer. There's no such thing as independent believers. If you look at Scripture, both Tanakh and apostolic writings, it's always a family. It's always an assembly. It's always people. The temple was made so that people could flock to it, and there was the assembly. In Israel, it's called, in fact, Stephen calls it the kehillah in the wilderness, again translated by King James as the church in the wilderness. The kehillah in the wilderness. Yeshua said, I've come to build my kehillah. I've come to build my assembly. And an assembly is a group. You cannot be a group by yourself. We have to be together. You know, and this is one of the things in psychology that you come up with many times, is when people tend to be alone, whether they're recluse type people, they don't like, sometimes they start having their own idiosyncrasies. We need one another so that we could bounce off of one another and learn from one another. You know, iron sharpens iron. We need one another. I need you and you need me, and each one of us needs one another. And we need to learn from the top down. Everybody needs to have, one of the first things I always ask people many times when I meet people is I ask them, who's your pastor? What congregation are you with? And many times, many people say, well, we're not under someone. Well, why not? Every one of us has to have leadership. Every one of us has to have those around us. I cannot be off there by myself. In fact, I have a problem with some of my associates, some of my friends that are what they call themselves itinerant preachers. And some of these itinerant preachers, they have big ministries even on the internet or on TV and things like that, but they're off by themselves. And they don't have a congregation. They don't have no accountability. They're not accountable to anyone. Who are you accountable to? And one of the things that we're going to look at next week in part 4 and our final part of this series is we're going to look at the idea of accountability as a believer. We all need to have accountability. We need to be accountable to someone. In fact, one of the most important things that for myself, I have to be accountable. I can't be here by myself. I have to be accountable. And every one of us, we're accountable as an eldership, a presbytery. And every one of us has to be accountable. And we'll learn more about this as we go on. Let's go ahead and look at the table of contents. Last week we looked at Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic Ministry, the planter and the planting team. Today we're going to look, I'm going to try to finish the rest of it. The rest of it is pretty easy, but if we'll just go to where we end, where an hour ends, and then we will continue the next week. But these are things that if you want to start a ministry, whether it's a home group, you want to just start a home group at your home, you want to get some Bible studies together, maybe you're in some place. Here in New Mexico, we have a lot of places where there's nobody, where there's no congregations. There's not even Christian congregations. And so many of you that have written to us or messaged us said, we're here in this little town and there's nothing here. We're in Magdalena, there's nothing here. We're here and there's nothing going on. What do we do? Well, my responsibility is to help you to start a home group. You could start a home group. Again, some of you are listening to our YouTube. I've heard a group that listens to our YouTube, and you come and listen to the YouTube together, and then they discuss and things like that. Or the YouTubes of other good and faithful ministers out there, because there's a lot of really good and faithful messianic ministry out there, websites and things like that. Of course, there's also a lot of really bad ones. So again, discernment comes in. But we need to have this idea of, I need to get something. And as that grows, of course, you can't stay in your house forever. We've had home ministry. I've planted several ministries that have started in homes, and they're really good fellowship. They're so good. Some of them we'd stay till 11, 12 o'clock just discussing and eating and things like that. But then as it grows and the kids go, then in some of them we had Bible studies and for the little kids in the bedroom and this and that. But it got so big that we needed to have a building, so we rented storefronts, and then we bought actual buildings. This is the third building that we bought with Maranatha Olive Tree Ministries. And so it grows, and I want to help you in that. And I want to help you how to get started, how to do these things, because every one of you, I have this vision that when Adonai plants a ministry, Adonai has always given a vision of ministry to a minister, a man. Adonai always calls a man to start a ministry. And when that ministry started and it comes, what happens when Adonai calls the man, his man home? Well, sometimes it's passed on to a next generation. And sometimes it's passed on to family. Sometimes it's passed on to other ministers. Sometimes they call in someone from the outside. But what really happened? Does it go on? And one of the things that was important about Yeshua. And I see this, I'm not a pool player, but I've played pool a couple of times. And when you have the, what they call it, the rack, right, the rack, and you have the little white ball, and you hit it, and it breaks up the balls, and they all go different directions. That's what happened with Yeshua. Yeshua got 12 men. But what happened when Yeshua left? And he told him, I'm leaving. And in fact, he tells him, I'm going to die. And Peter says, no, you can't go. But what happened? Adonai sent them into the world, and they all went different places. Thomas, it is said, went to India. Some went to what is now Afghanistan. In fact, some of the Taliban right now are actually lost tribes and people that have were in some of the early ministry of some of the apostles. And so they went out. The ball was hit, and they all scattered. And in a sense, can you imagine the idea that when a congregation, the leader goes home, that everybody takes a piece of that, and they take off on their own? That's what family, marriage, and children are all about. Family, marriage, and children are all about. How many of you still live with your moms, with your kids and grandkids, and everybody together, in a sense, depending on mom and dad? Nobody should. Sometimes, they're always welcome, right? And we would always be welcome at my mom's house, no matter what. But that's not normal. What it is, and you shall leave your father and mother, cleave to your wife, and you'll become one. And then you have children, and those children will leave home. They'll cleave to their wives, have children, and that's how the world multiplies. Well, the same thing in ministry. Technically, my responsibility is to disciple every one of you. Every one of you. And some of you have gifts of teaching. Some of you have gifts in the prophetic. Some of you have gifts in this. Some of you have talents, music talents. And my vision would be that when all is said and done, that everybody does not huddle. It's not time to huddle. It's actually time to go. You've been trained. You've been discipled. You've been taught. Now go and teach others. Go and make disciples. Disciples in Las Vegas. Disciples maybe in California. Disciples in Placitas. Disciples in teaching in different parts of New Mexico, different parts of the country, even the world. Adonai might send you to another country. And that's what it's all about. That's what disciples, and that's what I want to do. I want to start building this idea of how do I start? How do I start a fellowship, a home group, a congregation? What are the things that are needed to start these home groups, these fellowships, and these congregations? Well, today we're going to chapter 3. And by the way, I'm working this into a booklet so that we could start giving to people that wanted to start something. And this will be combined with our Haderech program. And so this with the Haderech program, this is going to be part 2 of the Haderech program, and be able to teach exactly how to start. Now, we're talking about messianic. We're not talking about starting a Christian church. We're not starting a traditional Jewish synagogue. And we're not talking about that. We're talking about messianic ministry. Now, most messianic congregations, how many of you have been part of or visited another messianic congregation around the country, wherever you go? There's messianic congregations in different places. And every time I go someplace, visit my aunts or nieces or nephews someplace, the first thing I do is I always try to find a messianic congregation that's closest or on the way. I planned my trip so I could either be there where there's a congregation close by, or that I could find a congregation on the way there or on the way back, which I've done many times in Tulsa, in Phoenix, in Flagstaff, San Jose, L.A., Texas, a lot of times, Oklahoma, or different places that I've been. I always try to find a congregation, because my response, in fact, since I became a believer, back in 1970, since I became a believer, I could probably say I could count in my 10 fingers how many times I've missed a service. And again, many times in those days, I was a Roman Catholic. Many times I was autonomous Catholic. I was a Protestant. I was Christian. I was different congregations that I've been to. But that's one area where, since I became a believer, and again, the times that I have missed have been because, one, I had a heart attack. Okay, so I couldn't go for that 1 week. But I was there the next week. And so many times Adonai is wanting us to be faithful to getting together. And our last thing, if we get there today, is forsake not the assembling of yourselves. We cannot forsake assembling ourselves. And so most Messianic congregations are part of the worldwide Messianic movement, which is a movement that was started pretty much in the late 1800s, in the early 1900s. Very few, what they call themselves, Hebrew Christians, and the term Messianic was starting to be used more and more in the early 1900s. A couple of books were written about Messianic movement in the early 1900s. But the Messianic ministry, didn't really start going on until the early 70s. In fact, many, again, a product of the wider Jesus movement, if you remember that. The first Messianic congregation that I attended was a Messianic home group in L.A. when I was going to school there in L.A., and I believe the name was Beth Shar Shalom. I believe that was the name of it. And one of the leaders was a man by the name of Mitch Glazer, who now is the director of Chosen People Ministries. And I attended that several times. My roommate at our college, my dorm mate, was a Jewish believer, and he was still associated with Jews for Jesus. And so I got to, and this was in 74, 75, graduated in 76 there in LA from the Light and Powerhouse with Hal Lindsey. And of course, Hal Lindsey was a very big proponent of Israel. And I started having that desire to associate in this area. Of course, I came back and went to a Roman Catholic university, graduated, and I became a priest, and then was there for a while. But even then, I had this longing to have this Hebraic, this biblical format. I was associated at that time with one of my mentors, Eliezer Erbach. I don't know if any of you know. I'm sure many people that might be listening know Eliezer Erbach. He was a Holocaust survivor, a true Jewish rabbi, and he's the first one that gave me a tikkun and really mentored me in some of the ways that a Messianic congregation should. And again, I was still at that point a Catholic. In fact, that's the first time he came. He came and he was raising funds to bring Jewish people from Russia and the Ukraine to Denver. So we started helping him out. He was with a group called the Board of Mission to the Jews, which has since become Chosen People Ministries. So he would come and mentor me and some other men, the people from Adat Yeshua, and teach us many things. I longed for Hebrew. When I was in the military, I got R&R in Hong Kong from Vietnam, and I took some 2 weeks off, and as I was there in the YMCA, which was a servicemen's YMCA, and they had little hotels for rooms for servicemen. They had a Christian bookstore in the YMCA there, and that's where I bought my first Hebrew Bible. I didn't know Hebrew. I don't even know why now I bought a Hebrew Bible, but I had this Hebrew Bible, and I learned the Hebrew alphabet, and I just had a hunger, and to get together with believers. I remember telling my bishop, I want to do a Passover, and of course he said no, and it was because of that I finally resigned and started the Maranatha Missions Ministry, because I wanted more. I wanted more from this, and this is the hunger that I'm looking for in men and women. That's what some of the hunger that I'm looking for in you. Some of you might have this hunger for more in this area, because I believe, interestingly enough, Adonai says, in the last days, I'm going to gather my people together. Now, since then, in my work with DNA and DNA companies and genealogy, I've been doing genealogy for over 40 years now. And in that, I found my Hebrew heritage. I found that some of my ancestors, some of my great-great-great-great-grandfathers were rabbis and were part of the Halevi family from Spain, that descendants came here to New Mexico. Some of you who are related to me, and many New Mexicans here have that same heritage. Dr. Dal Sanchez, that about 80% of Hispanics in New Mexico are descendants of the Sephardic Jews that came here because of the Inquisition and became what we call today crypto-Jews or Anusim, and we're their descendants. And so is it that genetic hunger? And I wanted to start a messianic ministry. I didn't know how. At that time, I was getting books from other messianic early writers. In the early internet system, I started studying. But one thing that I did a mistake, which a lot of people are doing, and some of you here are doing the same mistake, is many are going to the internet and getting hold of rabbinically oriented messianic ministries or rabbinically oriented Jewish roots or Hebrew roots groups. And I was led into a path that was becoming very, very legalistic and rabbinic, and we don't need to go there. And so getting away from a lot of the Christian backgrounds, the holidays and all those things, the Christmases and Easters and all that, and a lot of the theology, the replacement theology, the theology of the divisions of times and all that Christianity is plagued with. I went from here to here. Well, with this study, I want to save you time, especially those young men that are here that want to learn, and those of you that have called us and said, we want more in this area. I want to have you not go from Christianity to Judaisms, or from the Judaism. If you're a Jewish person, I don't want you to go into Christianity. What we need to do is both from the Christianities and the Judaisms that are out there, come to the olive tree of Israel, which is Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic. We need to receive a balance. And this is what I want to do here, do a balance. Now, most Messianic Jewish congregations are affiliated with several denominations. The UMJC, which is the Union of Messianic Jewish Congregations, the MJAA, MIA, and there's several others. And these are big denominations. And there are congregations that, like there's a Beth Israel group of congregations, there's a Beth Yeshua group of congregations that are several cities, and they are affiliated together. But most of these are what's called Messianic Judaism. Now, Messianic Judaism is usually Jewish believers, men and women that have become believers. They were Jewish. They grew up Jewish, Reform, conservative, or secular Jews, and they accepted Yeshua. Some of them accepted Yeshua, in Christian churches, and many of them were part of a Christian ministry. And then they realized that, I'm Jewish, why don't I? And many of them developed what I would call most Messianic Jewish congregations are a form of they're a Reform Jewish congregation with, again, Yeshua put in. So it's mostly a Reform. They follow kind of like the Reform model of Rabbinic Judaism. And then, of course, Yeshua is added on. Now, we are not part of Messianic Judaism. Olive Tree is not affiliated with any of the Messianic Jewish denominations. We are an autonomous ministry. We do have other groups that we are helping, but I am teaching them that you will be autonomous. I will not be over you, and you will not be under me. We need to be partners. Partners is better, because when you have denominations, then we get into that whole of the denominations. And so we're an autonomous congregation. There's a lot of autonomous congregations out there also. A lot of autonomous congregations. Now, there's also what people call the Hebrew and or Jewish roots ministries. And many times people say, are you a Jewish roots congregation? Or are you a Hebrew roots? Are you into Hebrew roots? No, we're not. Most Hebrew and Jewish roots movement ministries and congregations are usually Gentile-oriented. They're usually Gentile ministries that are learning about their Hebrew roots, their Jewish roots, as they call them. Now, I don't want to get into the idea of Jewish roots, because modern Judaism, apart from being an ethnic group, Jewishness is an ethnic, it's a race, and that is separate from Judaism. To be Jewish is to have the blood from Abraham, DNA. This is a genetic, this is a DNA. That is a people group. But there is a religion of Judaism. Now, most people in the people group who are Jewish, the majority of them today are probably secular and atheist. Now, there's a group that are Orthodox. There's a group that are conservative, Reform, and there's other liberal groups there. And within the context of the Jewish people, many of them are in the religion of Judaism, and most of them are rabbinic. Now, there's some non-rabbinic. The Karaite group are non-rabbinic Jewish people, Jews that are non-rabbinic. And so we have Judaism as a religion. Here we don't follow Judaism as a religion. Olive Tree is not a Messianic Jewish congregation. And so one of the most important things is that we are not Gentile Christian oriented, and we are not rabbinic oriented. There's other messianic ministries that I would really want to warn you about, and especially warn those of you that are out there, because you're seeking to study the Word. You want to grow. You're seeking. You want to know, what is this about? And there's several movements that I want to warn you about. First of all, it's the two-house movement. The two-house movement is, or what we call the two-house heresy. This is a movement of mostly Gentile. There might be some Jews in it, but it's mostly Gentile believers in Yeshua who believe that the two houses of Israel that split right after the death of Solomon, one of those houses and became the kingdom in the north. They called themselves the kingdom of Israel, and the kingdom of the south called themselves the kingdom or the house of Judah. Now, they were, again, 14 tribes, as you see here, and 12 with Ephraim and Manasseh added onto them. And those split, and of course, it caused 10 in the north and 2 in the south. And so, in 721, Assyria came and took the northern kingdom away. And as the northern kingdom was taken away, they are what is called the lost tribes of Israel. Well, they're not lost. They're still back in the east. They're in Afghanistan. They're in China. They're in India. They're in Burma, what is called Burma, and Africa, and other parts of the world. They spread out to other parts of the world. So they're still there, and many of them are coming back and making aliyah back to Israel today. But Judah, of course, stayed there, and there was the Babylonian captivity. And so what the two-house movement says is that the Jewish people are Judah, but they say that the Jews, that the Israelites that went to the east, that they made a U-turn and they went to Europe. And so the European people are not the sons of Japheth. They're not the Anglo people of Europe are not the sons of Japheth. They're actually the lost tribes. So they say that England is the tribe of Ephraim, and Ireland, Manasseh. Sweden is Dan. The Frenchies are Reuben, I believe. They have different designations for all these European nations. That's a heresy. That's called British Israelism, and part of the old Armstrong Worldwide Church of God heresies that they came up with. And so the Europeans are not Israel. Yeah, there might be some Israelite blood, DNA in there, because Israelite blood has spread through the four corners of the earth. In fact, there might even be Israelite blood among Cherokee or among Aztec or among New World peoples, as someone from there might have come here. But we cannot say that a nation is a tribe. And there's a lot of people that are bringing in this idea that, I know, I talked to a lady who's actually doing something at the Las Lunas Stone, and they're talking about, I'm from Ephraim. I know I'm from Ephraim. And there's no way we could know what tribe we're from except Judah and or Levi, because those DNA markers are very, very significant. Here in our congregation, we have Tom over here. We have Pastor Dave back there, whose DNA markers show what's called the Cohen model haplotype. In other words, our brother Tom here and Dave and a couple of others of you are actually descendant of an ancestor going up to Aaron the high priest. That's the Cohen model haplotype. So genetically, by DNA, we could actually trace those lines down, the Levites down. I was looking at some of the Levite lines even last night, And so some of these Hebraic, but of the other tribes, we don't know what tribes, or there's no way to find that out today. There's also another group called the Sacred Name Movement. Now, the Sacred Name Movement, and we're going to be talking about later on about the name that we use. Here we use the name Yahweh, Yahweh. The V and the W, of course, are interchangeable. Here in America, we say, we went to the store. In Europe, old Jewish man might say, we went to the store. V. And so they, instead of we, they say we went. And so that's interchangeable. But the Sacred Name Movement has all these strange names. I heard Yahuwah and Yahweh, all kinds of strange names. And the thing about the Sacred Name Movement is that you have to say it. In fact, someone says, you can't say Yahuwah, you have to say Yahuwah. And there's all kinds of different things. Some of them use the word Jehovah or Yehovah. And the Sacred Name Movement says these are the names and you have to use this. And some of them are very, very strict. In fact, there's a Sacred Name Movement that actually uses Yahweh, which is the correct name. And their idea is that if you don't use this name, you're going to be cursed. Well, there's no such thing like that. And so they're very strict on, you got to use it my way with my pronunciation and this way, when Scripture shows us otherwise. And there's also the lunar Sabbath people. The lunar Sabbath people, the Sabbath is on the seventh day, today's the Sabbath. But these people go that the first new moon is the first Sabbath of the month, and then they count 7 days. Depending if the first new moon is a Wednesday, that's the Sabbath. So they'll count 7 days. That's another Sabbath. They count another 7 days. And of course, 7 doesn't go into 30. So what do you do with those extra days? Well, those are free days, and you wait till the next new moon. How crazy can they get? You know. And we got the pronomian. The pronomian people are people that say, believe exactly the way we do. But they say they want to take all Jewishness out of it. Take all Hebraicness out of it, which we can't. Because remember, Yeshua and the apostles were Hebrews. And we come from a Hebrew background. And there's aspects of Torah that we still need to follow from a Hebraic point of view. And so when you say, I want to start a messianic ministry, what's your identity? The most important thing you need to learn, what is my identity? Who am I? What do I want to start? Do I want to start Messianic Judaism? Now, I don't encourage anybody to start Messianic Jewish congregations. Again, because they come from a rabbinic background, Christian and rabbinic background put together. And so one of the most important things is that we need to find our identity. Our identity here. We are a congregation made up mostly of Gentile background peoples, Jewish peoples, and even Sephardic Jewish families who can trace, again, their heritage back to Judah, back to Israel through the Cohens, through the Levites, and through the J markers. And we reject all these things. And so when you want to start thinking about, I'm going to have a home group. Well, what's this home group right away from the beginning? What are the names? What? And we'll talk more about this. Now, in chapter 4, we're going to talk about the vision and mission of the ministry. Every ministry needs a vision and a mission. What is the vision of Olive Tree fellowship. And what is our mission? Our vision, my vision that Adonai gave me, and our vision as a body, is to be a Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic ministry, bringing the gospel of the kingdom from Albuquerque to the world. That's my vision, to be this three-pointed ministry, not just Messianic, not just Mosaic, not just Apostolic, because many people, as we said 2 weeks ago, camp usually on one of those two. Many of them camp on the Mosaic, and they just do everything Mosaic, and sometimes even add all kinds of other stuff. Some Messianic, some very Apostolic, very St. Paul type of people. But we need to be all three. We need to have a balance. So that's our ministry. And to bring the gospel of the kingdom. You know, it's interesting that a lot of Messianic congregations don't like to use the word gospel too much. The good news, because that sounds too evangelical. That sounds too Christian-y. Well, the gospel, the good news, is not a Christian invention. It is Yeshua. And this gospel of the kingdom, he said, shall be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations, and then the end will come. And so we must be a gospel preaching ministry of Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic ministry to the whole world. And what is the I kind of went to the vision and mission. The mission is, how will the planting team, what is our mission here? How do we accomplish our vision? We accomplish our vision here by having Shabbat services to teach, to disciple, by having Wednesday night Bible studies. Our mission is to have a Wednesday night Bible study where any of you could come and ask any question you want. Our Wednesday nights are built on questions and answers. You ask the question, and we'll go to the Torah, we'll go to the scriptures to get if any of you, especially those of you that are visitors, or you have a question that it's never been answered by our sermons, by our Bibles, you're welcome to come and ask whatever question you want. Why do you do that? Why don't you do this? In my other ministry, my other congregation that I used to go to, they used to do this, or they didn't do that. Why do you a lot of people say, why don't you parade the Torah scrolls around? Why don't you do this? Why do you do it this way? And I'm willing to ask even about why seats, why this, why that. You're welcome to ask. And so that's how we accomplish our goal, our vision. We accomplish our vision also by having teaching you the feasts of Yahweh, having Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, and doing all the things that Scripture teaches to do, and teaching the men to be those men that Adonai has called. So every congregation, us included, has a vision and a mission. The first thing that every one of you that are contemplating ministering in the future, start thinking of what is your vision. If I start even a home group, what is my vision for the home group, and how will I accomplish that vision? Your mission will be how you accomplish your vision. That's your mission. That's your daily mission, your weekly mission, your yearly mission. How will you accomplish that? And so the planting team, whether it's you alone, you and your wife, you and 2 or 3 others, need to come up with these 2 things. Now, I missed what is the primary target audience. Anytime you want to start a Bible study, think of what is my primary target audience. Now, as most Messianic Jewish congregations, their target audience is the Jewish people. Their idea is to win their fellow Jews. And that's an excellent ministry. Paul was an apostle to the Gentiles. Peter was an apostle to the Jewish people. Peter and Paul's ministry was different. And every apostle had a different ministry. Thomas, like I said, had a ministry in India. And so there's even congregations in India that still say the apostle Thomas started this congregation. And so there's a primary target audience. My primary target audience, Olive Tree's primary target audience is the Gentile nations. My responsibility, I want to be a teacher to Gentiles of the Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic ministry. There's other Messianic congregations here in town and throughout the United States and the world whose primary target is Jewish people and or Jews and Gentile. And of course, any Jewish person that is here or that comes here, we work together as a ministry, like Paul says, to the Jew first and the Greek as well. So we should have a idea of ministering to Jewish people first and then to the Gentile. But since we live in New Mexico, we live in a place where there's a lot of Gentiles, and the majority of us, of course, grew up Gentile, come from Gentile. In fact, in our DNA, probably every one of us, including Jewish people, by the way, including Jewish people, every one of us is a Heinz 57. Every one of us has all these, if you look at my DNA chart, there's so much Celtic. The majority is Celtic. And then there's a funny story on that. Oh, I won't go into it. Of me being Celtic. I'll tell it to you. I was, of course, a Roman Catholic, so I went to a Roman Catholic charismatic prayer meeting, and there was this little Irish nun, and she prayed for me, and she prayed that, in fact, what she prayed was that, I've mentioned this before, that I'd be a pastor to pastors. And then she says, you're Irish. I said, no, I'm not Irish. I'm Hispanic. I said, I'm Hispanic, and I have a great-grandma that is Apache, and I have a grandfather who was from Mexico, and my ancestors are from Spain, from Galicia, Spain, and I'm Hispanic. No, you're Irish. Well, when I did my DNA, it did turn out that I had Apache or native DNA. I did have all these other DNAs, but the majority of my DNA was Celtic. And the biggest, highest matches were men by the name of Turner from Ireland. What am I doing with all these Turner matches? And so that's kind of a funny little story about that. But what is our target audience and our secondary target audience? Like some of my secondary target audiences for here, I have a heart for the native peoples, and I have a ministry called Voice to the Nations that we've gone out. I haven't done this for a couple of years, but in the past we've gone out to native peoples in New Mexico, different, about 3 or 4 different native groups and Bible studies among the Navajo people and among some other peoples. Also some native peoples in Mexico and the interior of Mexico, that, we need to be a voice. I want to be a voice to the Gentiles, a voice to the nations. I want to be a call. The word kachal from kehila, from assembly, is to call out. And so I want to call out the Gentiles to bring them to the gospel of the kingdom. And the gospel of the kingdom is a Hebraic gospel, a Jewish Hebraic gospel that Adonai has given to us. Now, part of the thing that we also need to look at when we planting team is the nomenclature. Are we going to use Hebrew or English? And of course, I believe we need to use Hebrew and English, Hebrew and Spanish, if we're ministering to a Spanish group. I've had Bible studies in Spanish. I've gone to Mexico to the Spanish people, Spanish-speaking people there, and it should be Hebrew, which is very important. If you're going to start a messianic ministry right now, start learning Hebrew. Start learning Hebrew. Young men, start learning Hebrew. Start teaching Hebrew to your children, to your grandchildren. Start learning Hebrew. Hebrew is a must. In fact, I've gone to many, well, not many, but I've gone to several messianic congregations in the last 40 or so years. And many of these congregations, they don't even have Torah scrolls. The messianic rabbis don't even know Hebrew. If you're going to be a messianic rabbi, or even call yourself a rabbi, you need to learn Hebrew. And it's important to learn Hebrew. So every one of you, every man, every young man, please start learning Hebrew, because that is part of the mission, is to teach Hebrew and to bring the body to a Hebrew mentality. Now, chapter 5 is the leadership. What kind of leadership is there going to be? Now, one of the first things about messianic ministry is you notice that most messianic leaders are called rabbi. Messianic rabbis, or some just rabbi. One of the first thing, are you going to be called a pastor, or are you going to be called a rabbi? Now, I do not call myself rabbi, again, because of what Yeshua said, but I call myself either a pastor or a Torah teacher. A Torah teacher is one of the words that is used in Scripture. Again, a pastor teacher is the actual new covenant. And remember, we are living in new covenant times. We're not living in Tanakh time. We're not living in Tanakh time. Tanakh time is the time of the first covenant. We're not living in first covenant times. We're living in new covenant times. And that's, by the way, one of the differences between Messianic Judaism and Mosaic, Messianic, Apostolic, is that sometimes the idea of, are we still living according to the full Mosaic way of doing things? And the answer is no, we're not. And why not? Because Jeremiah 31:31 says, the days are coming when I will make a Brit Chadashah. I will renew the covenant of Moses. I will renew the covenant. I'll give you a Brit Chadashah. But not like I made it with your ancestors on that day. They broke that covenant. The first covenant was broken. Can you imagine the first day that it was given, that it came down? It was broken. They were breaking it downstairs as it was being received upstairs. And Moses broke the actual tablets physically to signify that they broke the covenant. So Israel has been living with a broken covenant from the time of Moses to the time of Yeshua. An incomplete covenant. And that's why a new covenant, deep within them I will plant my Torah. So the Torah in the new covenant is planted inside. It's not above us. We are not under Torah. Torah is inside. Excuse me. Torah is inside of us. Torah is deep within us. And in Ezekiel 36, he's going to have the Ruach. He says, I'm going to send you my spirit, and I'm going to plant my spirit, give you a new heart. And through that new spirit, you will be able to keep my ways, my mishpatim, hukim, my Torah. And so it's different now. By the way, in the first covenant, there was a high priest and there was the priest, the Kohanim, and there was a Leviim, the Levites. And in the new covenant, there is the episcopos, the presbyteros, the overseers, the elders, and the diaconoi, the deacons. So here's the first covenant, here's the new covenant. Two different ministries. We are not under this ministry, we are under this ministry. By the way, where do the rabbis fit in? In the middle, there is what is called a rabbi. The word rabbi means my great one. And it's an honorary title for a teacher, a great teacher. A person who is a great scholar and a teacher was a rabbi. And in the New Covenant scriptures, the Brit Chadashah, the apostolic writings, did you know that only two people are mentioned as rabbis? Yeshua is called a rabbi many times, and Yochanan HaKohen, John the priest, the Baptist, was called a rabbi once. Now, Nicodemus is the top scholar of Israel. He's the top teacher of Israel. And it says that Nicodemus came to Yeshua by night and calls him rabbi. Nicodemus, the top teacher of Israel, calls Yeshua rabbi. But Yeshua nor John calls Nicodemus rabbi. Nicodemus was not a rabbi. He was a Torah teacher. He was a top teacher. How do we know he was a top teacher? Because when Yeshua tells him, you must be born from above, all of a sudden he can't understand it. Do I have to go into my mother's womb and be born again? And Yeshua, I don't know if he did it with a laugh, but he says to him, you, the teacher of Israel, and you don't know these things? Now, Yeshua didn't say, you a teacher, or you a rabbi of Israel, or you a great one of Israel, and you don't know. He says, you the teacher. Ha didaskolos in Greek. You the teacher of Israel, and you don't know these things? Gamaliel was the teacher of Paul. Shaul. Paul, the apostle, Shaul. Gamaliel was his teacher. Notice that no place is he called Rabbi Gamaliel. He was Gamaliel. He was Paul's teacher. But he didn't call himself, or they didn't call him rabbi. And then nobody else is called rabbi until the time of the Mishnah, when Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yochanan and these men are called rabbis. But that's 200 years after Yeshua. 200 years after Yeshua. And so to me, the best titles to use for yourself are pastor or Torah teacher. I'm a Torah teacher or congregational leader. But one of the most important things, whatever you do, and by the way, the reason I don't call myself rabbi is because in the greater Jewish world, to be a rabbi, you have to have these qualifications that today don't fit with anybody, whether you're Jewish and or Gentile, whether you call yourself a Jewish Messianic rabbi or a Gentile Messianic rabbi. There's no qualification that we could do that going through, because the rabbinical school usually goes through the Talmud and the Mishnah, and those are outside our scope. We don't go there. Those are outside our scope. That's outside. That's adding to Torah, and we don't want to go there. And so a rabbi is usually also a scholar, more of a scholar in Talmud than he is even of the scriptures. But what are the qualifications if you want to be a pastor, a teacher? If one of you says, Pastor, I want to be a pastor, what do I need? There are qualifications. What is the personal calling of this man? Are you called? Are you called to be a teacher? Are you called to be a pastor? Because everything has to do with Adonai calling you. And probably since he's called you since your mother's womb, that means growing up, there's been something in you. I met a young man in prison as I was ministering. And he had done all kinds of bad things, and he ended up in prison. But here was a young man that I knew had a calling to be a man of Elohim, to be a minister of the gospel. Since he was small, he had even this longing and this urging. And of course, he got in with the wrong crowd and went the other way. Thank Adonai that he said, in fact, many of these young men that are now pastors and teachers and have been in the world, been in drugs and all kinds of bad stuff. But the calling of Adonai is without repentance, we're told. The gifts and callings of Adonai are without repentance. If Adonai has called you since you were a young man, that calling and that gift is still there. And yeah, in between there, all kinds of things might have happened to you right now. And you know what? Adonai will heal all that, set that free, and that gift and calling could be resurrected from the dead in a sense. And so just because you messed up, just because, well, I'm not qualified because I did this, and that. Well, did you repent? Have you accepted Messiah? Are you born again? Yes, 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 yes. Well, then let's start at the bottom again. Always remember, Adonai does not give up on us. We could give up on him, like Philippians says. We could deny him, but he will never deny us. And so we need to do that. So the personal calling is the most important thing. Secondly is your education. Education is not first, because you could be the brightest and the most scholarly person, but if you don't have a calling, then it's just deadness. It's just religion. But education, I believe, is the most important. What is the formal secular education? You know, what secular education did you have? Did you graduate from high school? And do you have any college? Any things like that? The informal theological education. You know, have you been studying? Are you a student of the Word? I know many of you men are students of the Word. You spend time studying the Word, and that is of sometimes more importance than even a formal secular education. Although I do believe the two should come together. But I also believe that a formal theological education is of even more importance, because with a formal, you could learn, again, the Greek and Hebrew and some of the things that are very important. I really don't think nobody should stand behind the pulpit unless he knows Hebrew and Greek. If you don't know Hebrew and Greek, yes, you could go to books and you could, learn what some other people have said, find out. And it's a good secondary, by the way. And I'm talking about whoever will be the congregational leader. Now, if Adonai has called you to be a teacher, a pastor, that is an associate, that is there to help out the pastor, then you don't need all those, educational qualifications. But if you're going to be the congregational leader, I really do believe you need more formal studies in hermeneutics and all these other studies. What about experience? Again, with the calling, the most important thing of experience is, have you had a new birth experience? And again, without a new birth experience, all education just goes out the door. It's religion. A lot of my professors in all the various colleges and universities that I've been to universities with very excellent theological minds, professors that were brilliant, but they weren't born again. They knew the scriptures like the back of their hand. I've been to Israel and studied under men that I don't know how they know all these things about Yeshua, but they're not born again. And we don't want that. Again, his ministry experience in other congregations. So when I look at the leadership, in fact, every pastor, every congregational leader should be looking for other leaders to join him. And these are the things that I'm looking for. And again, we could go on into the qualifications from Timothy, from Titus. What are the qualifications even from the Torah? The Torah gives us all kinds of qualifications for elders and leaders. And so even here, I'm looking for some of you to be some of our elders over here. And we'll look at that now. Every congregation, as you grow, should have an eldership. No congregation should be led by one man. No congregation should be led by one person. There should always be an eldership. In fact, right now, we lost our brother couple, has it been 2 years now, almost a year and a half. And we're looking for another elder. And so there's how many elders? There should be at least 3 elders. Could be more. We've had times when we've had 6 elders. Each one has qualifications. Again, the qualifications of elders and deacons are in 1 Timothy and Titus. And so if you want to know about, am I qualified to be an elder, and am I qualified to be a deacon? What are the qualifications? What are the duties? These are things that we need to go into, because eldership has qualifications and they have duties. The duties of elders are this, and the duties of deacons are this. The deacons are the servants. The word deacon means a minister, a servant, eved in Hebrew. And I need more deacons in this congregation. I need more elders. Now, what we usually do here, this is one of our protocols, is we get you to become a deacon first, to be a servant. And after, no one could be a deacon here unless you've been here several years, and you are a deacon for several years, then you could become an elder. So it starts at the bottom and it goes up. By the way, the deacons were servants of the congregation. So the eldership could spend their time, and the apostles could spend their time in study of the word and prayer. And so a congregation, the congregation in Jerusalem had seven original deacons, 7 men, to be servants. And their service was for the women of the congregation, by the way. Their main ministry was to the women of the congregation. The deacons served the food and that to the widows. The deacons also work with the building. They also work with the grounds, and they also work with different ministries. One of the most important deacons here in our congregation is actually Richard Cottrell. This guy is a servant of servants, and that's what deacons do. They do that serving ministry, and serving you, serving the people. Not serving me. They're not my servants. They're your servants. And they serve us together in keeping this place, and those that are in the financial ministry are deacons that are there. Now, one of the most important questions for the leadership, and this is after you grow. This is after you start with a home Bible study, you become a fellowship, you become a congregation. Then, excuse me, the question is, should we incorporate? And incorporation means that especially if you have a building, the building will not have taxes, property taxes, and the taxes on the ministers. There are some blessings that you are not taxed for some of the finances that you get. And so there are some things that help out with incorporation. Of course, there's a lot of Messianic ministries that do not want to incorporate because of the laws. And many people think that incorporation also means that you have to do what the government says. Let me tell you, if the government tells us, like, this is one of the questions that will come up, especially for you young men in the future. If someone comes and says, a gay couple comes and says, I want to get married, I want you to perform the wedding, and I say, no, that's not biblical and I cannot do it. The question is, in the future, this is not happening now, but in the future, as with some things that we're learning, is will the state say, or the federal government say, you have to perform the wedding or else you lose your incorporation status? At that time, I will say, I will lose my incorporation status. I will give up the incorporation, which means that we can't have a building no more. Why? Because in this area, the property that we have, the building that we have, there's no way that we would be able to pay the taxes on this building. So in the future, young people, always remember that incorporation today is okay. In fact, that comes from Israel. The incorporation actually comes from Israel. Why? Because remember, the Kohanim and the Levites did not have property, and they were exempt from tithing in certain areas. They were exempt from a lot of stuff. In the United States, when we became a nation, that was one of the things that was given to the ministers. Again, and it has come down, but today the state has become bigger, I believe, than its riches, as they say. And I believe that in the future, the state might be come against us in this area. And when that happens, every congregation, every pastor I know that we've talked about this says we'll just have to go underground, and like in China and like in other places. Is that coming now? We don't see it in the near future, but that's a thing to think about also. And again, if anyone wants to talk about, we're incorporating several congregations, and I'm helping a brother incorporate also. And so that's very important. Let's go ahead and stand. We'll continue with chapter 6 next week. And we want to thank each and every one of you for having joined us today, and believe that Adonai wants to do many more things with you. I want to be here for those of you young men and young ladies that are here, that Adonai has called to ministry. I want to be here for those of you that are in our YouTube audience that have called and said, can you help us? Can you do some teachings on how to plant a Messianic congregation? And of course, we will go to your congregation. We're going to be going to Roswell, New Mexico in August. Me and a team are going to be going over there to help our some brothers that are from a Christian congregation that are transitioning to a Messianic congregation. And so this is part for them, for our brothers in Clovis and some of you that want to start ministries in other parts of New Mexico. Father, I thank you for Mosaic, Messianic, and Apostolic ministry. I thank you for the gospel of the kingdom. Father, this world, New Mexico, Albuquerque, needs Yeshua. But Father, they don't just need to be saved. Father, everybody's always going around preaching the gospel, the evangelism, and they preach the gospel, but they don't disciple their sheep. They don't disciple the little lambs. And Father, you've given us a discipleship ministry, and part of the discipleship ministry is to replicate ourselves, Father, in the people you've given us. And Father, I have a heart to pass on to the next generation, to this generation, how and why, when to do things for your kingdom. Yeverechecha Yahweh vaish merecha, air Yahweh panav elecha, vichunecha. Asa Yahweh panav elecha, vayasem lecha shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you, be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Shalom, shalom. Amen.
Shalom, shalom. Welcome to Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries. Thank you for joining us on our channel. If you have enjoyed this teaching and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so that you can be notified when we have new videos. If you would like to support Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries, please visit us at olivetreefellowship.com or torahunleashed.org. We thank you for your past support and hope to continue with you. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day. Shalom, shalom y bienvenidos a Olive Tree y a la Torah Desatada. Les doy gracias a ustedes y a Adonai por su apoyo que nos han dado aquí. Y si quieren continuar a hacer una donación, pueden ir aquí en torahunleashed.org o en olivetreefellowship.com y ahí pueden dar una donación. Su apoyo, su ayuda es importante en estos días. Shalom, shalom.